Once you've done overall adjusting with either a levels, curves, or some adjustment layers of the same thing, sometimes we need to go in and do some spot adjusting. And you can do this best with your Dodge and Burn tool. The Dodge and Burn tool need pixels to work on, and so I will show you how to create a non-destructive Dodge and Burn next, but first I'm going to show you how to do it on just the pixels. So I'm clicking on my original curve adjustment. You see I don't have any layers over here, and going back so it's just the one thing we're looking at by going to Window, Arrange, and Consolidate All to Tabs. Let's make a copy so that we're editing on our copy instead of the original, and then let's grab your Burn tool. I think this is a tool you'll really like. It is about midway down. You may have the Burn or the Dodge at the top. So Dodge looks like a magnifying glass, Burn looks kind of like a fist or something, which I've never quite figured out what was going on with that. But let's start with Dodge tool. Dodge is great, it brightens. If you have a circle, that is the size of the Dodge brush that you're using. If you have a X, like I do right now, you might actually have your caps locks on. That is a precision mode. If you turn cap locks off, you'll be able to see the area of the brush you're using. To try this out, just click and drag, and you'll notice the area brightening up around where you've brushed. And the brights will get a little bit brighter. So I've clicked and dragged and brushed around, and then I let go with my mouse. I'm going to go to my history panel and just step back so you can see what sort of difference that made. You can see that brightened things up quite a bit. I'm going to go back to my original state so I can show you a couple different things. You can change how strong that brush effect is by changing the exposure, which is up in the tool control panel. I'm going to change the exposure to about 20%. I don't want it to be really strong. What I want to do is create some emphasis and contrast where I want people to look first. In a portrait, that's the person's face, and with the lighting, she's got this beautiful rim light behind her catching in her hair, but her face is somewhat in shadow. So I can come in here with my Dodge tool and lighten up her face just a little bit. You can change the size of your Dodge tool by right-clicking or control-clicking and changing the size arrow. The Dodge tool is essentially a brush tool, which we will get really into working in just a couple of lessons. But for now, know you can change the size and also how soft or how hard the edge is with the little hardness slider. For this tool, it really should be down at about 100% so it has a soft edge. You don't want to get a stark line going through your image. When you click again out on the image, it will hide that window. So I'm just clicking and dragging anywhere that I want the shadows to lighten up a little bit. The other thing to realize is what I'm actually affecting is the midtones. You can change if you are affecting the midtones, the highlights, or the shadows up here under the range selection. So if I wanted to, say for example, brighten the highlights only, I could come here and choose the highlights, and now when I click and drag, it will only affect just the lightest areas, and it will leave the dark areas alone. Now just so you know, as I do this, I kind of have my left hand fingers just hovering over my Command Z so I can undo something really quick if I don't like it. I don't want her face to be glow in the dark, so I've undone that with a quick Command Z. If you do several steps and decide, I want to go back a few, you can either come over to your history or hold down Option Command and then push Z however many times you want to step back, which is kind of a nifty little thing. That's the Dodge tool. The Burn tool is the opposite, and this one time I'm going to come over here and grab the Burn tool by holding and clicking and holding down on the Dodge and then choosing Burn. Burn does the exact opposite. It darkens things. So if I come in here, you can see I'm adding some shadow which looks terrible, so we'll get rid of that. I can change the size of my brush in a couple of different ways. So there's the right click way, but the way I use mine all the time on a Mac, and I think it's the same on a PC, but I'm not swearing to it, is hold down the Control and Option keys, and then when I click and drag, I can see the exact characteristics of my brush. If I drag left to right, it gets bigger or smaller. If I drag up or down, it gets harder or softer. So I want to drag it all the way up and then click and drag to whatever size I want it to be. What I'm thinking of doing at the moment is darkening these corners. So I'm going to zoom out by hitting Command minus and then come in and just do a little bit of a faux vintage vignette effect. And I think I need a bigger brush for this. What happens by doing a vignette is you darken the corners and leave the center of interest bright, which attracts the viewer's attention. You can affect the midtones, the highlights, and the shadows like you could with the dodge. If I come up here and say I only want the shadows to get darker, well, that's a lot darker. Let's decrease exposure by a lot. Then it will leave more of the color in the midtone alone and just darken the dark areas, which actually looks a little bit better than just darkening the midtones. Now that we've done all that, let me show you the very last trick and then we'll call it good. Go back to Dodge. If you are working along and you're brightening, you can also immediately switch to burn by holding down Option or Alt. So here I've got my brighten tool, and then I'm going to hold down Option and it will darken. And I'm going to actually crank my exposure way up so you guys can see this. So here's brighten, there's darken, and I haven't switched tools, I'm just holding down Option, and it will switch back and forth between those between the settings that you have set up for those two tools. Let's take let's take a look at the difference between our burned and our not burned copy. That's quite a bit of difference. You can see how much more the face draws attention than it did in this version of the photo. So that's how we would do this by if you were on an actual layer or an object.